Remember when I used to make videos like this? It was at the old apartment, but it was still in a setup like this. I kind of miss it. It might come back. I know I'm super late to this, but we need to talk about the recent Plex news. It's time to talk about it. There's actually been more since the initial wave of Plex news that I was actually going to talk about for this video, and there's a lot going on. We're going to talk about it in this video. I'm EposVox, and this is Plex News. As always, I have a monthly recurring series where I talk about Plex on the channel, usually in the form of tutorials, although sometimes I want to apply a more, educational explanation of news going on. This series is sponsored by Plex. As always, I will have affiliate links where you can sign up for free, buy a Plex Pass for yourself, or buy one for someone else as a gift in the description down below. Please use them if you sign up. If you're unaware what Plex is a media streaming service, sort of. It's becoming more of a media streaming service now with the recent news we're going to talk about, but it's basically a program that you can run on a computer or a network drive, or now you don't even necessarily need a computer for it, to stream your own movie rips and TV show rips and downloads and things like that to all of your different devices and to even friends and family that aren't in your home. And it has a lot of cool functionality. You can learn more about it in the playlist linked in the video description. There was a lot of news that came out over the past couple months about Plex, some of it good, some of it bad. The big good thing is that they have a beta exclusive to the forums. I mean, you can obviously download it if you're not active on the forums, but not fully released yet, of their new transcoder for transcoding footage for other devices. Notably, this brings up specific fixes for, it now supports NVDEC or NVIDIA hardware decoding on Linux, which it didn't before. So all of you wondering why I didn't do my Tesla for Plex video on Linux, it's because part of the problem was the decoder functionality, which wasn't even present on Linux at the time of recording. Yeah. And then there's a few other aspects to it. One of the bigger ones is the zero copy functionality for the transcoding itself, which is a much more efficient and powerful way of encoding footage. And this is actually kind of more or less equivalent to the new NVENC encoder implemented into OBS 23 earlier this year. It is a zero copy functionality, meaning other than scaling, which can't be done on the encoder. So if Plex is doing scaling during the transcode, it's doing that first. It's sending it from the NVIDIA decoder to the NVIDIA encoder, or Intel. AMD is on the way, I believe, but I believe Intel is a surefire thing, AMD in the works. But from the graphics card based decoder of your source file, so a movie rip, sends it to the graphics card to be decoded, then is encoded again on the graphics card for the transcode, and then sent out instead of to the CPU, to the decoder, to the CPU, to the decoder, or to the encoder. Like, typically there's a lot more bounces that adds latency and makes the process much less efficient, and you'll see minor subtle quality or rather performance bumps that over the previous transcoder, a lot of people won't notice any difference, but it's just kind of one of those fixes that now that's kind of a thing encoding pipelines are doing. It's something they should implement. Once it's fully released and things like that, I'll have more coverage of it. I don't want to get into it too much until it's publicly available, because they have some other features they want to implement as well, such as HDR to SDR transcoding, which this lays the groundwork for, but doesn't necessarily implement just yet. Another big news was the new Plex app. I covered this last month in a video, but one of the things that I missed that a lot of people were confused about was they announced that it was ending support for HTPCs. Now, a lot of people were confused what this would mean, because you could still set up a HTPC with the new app and theoretically would be fine for most people. But the previous Plex Media Player app actually had a lot of support for things like Logitech Harmony Smart Remotes and a couple HTPC optimized features that they were then cutting out for the new Plex app for Plex Uno, as well as the 300-foot, I think they called UI, where it made everything super big. All of that was being removed in the new Plex app, and they were dropping support for that. Obviously, you could still connect your PC to your TV and run the new Plex app, and it would be fine if you were using mouse and keyboard. So that is a clarification of what that meant. But then after enough backlash, because honestly it was a bizarre decision that I was really concerned and confused by, they then announced that JK, they're going to find a way to keep it sustained, because they didn't want to keep developing features for it or maintaining support for it, the legacy support, because it was breaking other things or whatever. And I guess they had decided that it wasn't a significant enough user base for it to really make a difference. Little did they know that, is probably their most active and vocal user base. So yeah. So they announced that, okay, they're going to find a way to make it work. They're going to leave the original Plex Media Player app as it is, and they may not update it a ton moving forward, but they will figure out a way to keep both sides happy, at least for the time being. Now, on its own, I'd say this is a typical program supplier mix-up where they just decide they're going to cut off something that suddenly a lot of people really care about and always cared about and just didn't necessarily make that very clear. But then they also just announced that they are now getting support for Warner Brothers streaming. Now, they haven't announced any of the lineup for TV shows or movies, and this one is specifically only in the US, but they are partnering with Warner Brothers to bring some of their movies and TV shows as a native integration within Plex. Kind of like, you know, you would open up your smart TV and go to Netflix or Hulu or CBS or whatever. You would have a Warner Brothers channel, kind of like the title channel, in your Plex library, so you could immediately start streaming over the internet those files. Then, literally as I'm going to sit down to record this, it was announced that they've also partnered with Lionsgate, which is going to be an international thing, although specific movies and TV shows will have geo restrictions, to implement their movies and TV shows into Plex as well for streaming. And some of the language, when you keep that context in mind, some of the language that they mentioned regarding removing HTPC support is throwing some red flags for me, because they specifically said that it is far more efficient and effective to just use a media streaming box, a Roku, a Fire Stick, whatever, or the app on your smart TV, than a bulky power-consuming HTPC. And overall, I would mostly agree, although there's always little sacrifices you're making, and there's always issues with certain formats not being supported, and you need to transcode, whereas a PC can pretty much always direct play as long as you have mostly modern hardware. The problem for me is I foresee that a lot of people who aren't like the super server nerdy people like myself or Bite My Bits, where, you know, they have massive server racks dedicated to their Plex server, those kinds of people who are running Plex servers are generally, from what I have seen, and this may not be accurate or representative of everyone, but what I have seen, those kinds of people are using their HTPC as their Plex media server and just playing it directly on their TV and then streaming it to other devices. So cutting out that support, telling them to use something else, doesn't make sense, because they're already, like, they would be using more power. You know, it would be negligible, but they would still technically be using more power and causing more problems to use a separate streaming box from their HTPC. That doesn't make any sense to me. But also, when you keep in mind that they're killing off this kind of thing, the thing that heavily relies on using your own physical media that you've ripped and managing your own files, while also implementing more streaming media functionality, it makes me wonder if Plex is really trying to my first reaction was a good one. So I'm going to bring up a bunch of skepticism, but my first reaction was a good one in that, okay, Plex is getting some legitimacy. The MPAA isn't coming after them to tear them down. Instead, certain publishers are actually working with them to distribute their films and TV shows through them. That gives Plex some legitimacy, keeps it in the light, may mean that they have to behave a little bit more with some more maybe pirate-friendly features, which could suck. But overall, like, Plex is turning out to be a real deal. But then once I started thinking about it more and seeing the HTPC reaction and seeing the Lionsgate one go on top of it, my second reaction is that of skepticism and fear, because I worry that Plex is trying to move more towards the streaming media side, because that's what the MPAA and all of the film publishers or distributors are wanting. They don't want anyone to own their media. They want to stream it to them and manage licenses on that basis. And Plex is trying to get in on the streaming service game. If they're going to start pushing out more and more of the manual or physical media-based file management users, we may see Plex become a completely different beast. And it's pulling away from its roots, which started as, here's the files that you have, here's the media you already own, stream that and organize that wherever you want, which was the big appeal for me when I first started with it, the big appeal for a lot of people, especially the whole pirate scene that I'm still just baffled by. So to pull away from that and go towards streaming media, I start to wonder what the point of Plex would even be. I guess in a sense, Plex is kind of acting as a middleman or a front end for Warner Brothers or Lionsgate's own streaming services. That way they don't have to have their own streaming app or backend necessarily, although I can't imagine Plex is actually developing their own streaming backend service for these publishers. I don't know. I'm nervous. I will say that. I would love to hear what you guys think. Maybe I'm being a little too skeptical. Maybe I'm coming up with conspiracy theories, but to see them move so much towards streaming media for a service that was built on physical and local file playback is just a little scary to me, especially when so much else is moving towards less ownership of the media you buy and consume and more of this nonsense. And especially when there is problems with that, like the weird reframing and cutting of the Friends remasters and the Buffy remasters and things like that, where I want to have my box set and I want to rip it and I want to stream it. I don't want to stream the weird nonsense HD remaster that is objectively worse in every way. I don't want it to vanish all of a sudden while I'm in the middle of watching it like House did, or for it to go away in 2020 like The Office is, or Friends in 2021, you know, whichever that are getting removed from Netflix. That seems like a terrible time. I want to avoid that. That is why I'm using Plex. So for Plex to be turning into that is just scary and upsetting. Like I said, I do want to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think. As always, hit the like button, subscribe for more tech education and Plex content. I have more educational stuff moving forward and in the playlist link in the description below. I'm EposVox. I'll see you next time.